Board members, we're going to go ahead and begin. We have 2 hours today, so we're going to use every minute to do that well. The first item that we have is the high school graduation course requirements task force recommendations. And we're going to have a board member, you can't hear it? Yeah. So item 1, is that better? Item 1 is the high school graduation course requirements task force recommendations, and board member Belknap is going to speak to that for just 1 moment. Board member Belknap.
Thank you. As the task force chair, we appreciate that we had this discussion in board meeting. For some practicality cases, we've had some information on one. There's a word that says they. We had no idea what they were, and we would like to change that word to graduates. It's in your backup now. And then also on the civics, we, after speaking with several people already, having practical, was it practical what? Knowledge? Practical understanding of global and local and state. So we just changed the word to practical. And so with those 2 changes, I would like to make a motion that we put this maps or the portrait of a graduate out for public review for 30 days, 3 weeks, for 3 weeks. That's my motion.
Okay. So the motion before us is to release the portrait of a graduate document to the public for a 3-week comment period. Is there any discussion to that motion? Okay. Board member Lisa Cummins, is that you? Okay.
If I may address Laura directly, Board Member Belknap directly, Chair.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, my question is, why are we moving it to practical? We have an issue in our schools where we are not teaching correct civics, correct order of government. And in speaking with Jefferson Moss, you know, the reason, one of the reasons behind the financial literacy changes is to have another go at correcting the civic academics being taught. So if we're not specific and we're very general, I think we're missing the point. And so I'm just wondering why.
Board member Belknap, would you like to respond?
Thank you. Yeah, one of the reasons for that is so that it encompass all of our students, those who are the most severe to those who are the most academically sound. And in this case, I think it would be enough well-rounded so that we could include those kids who really struggle and not have them look at this and say, I'm not good enough. I can never meet this portrait of a graduate in the state of Utah. But it would also push those who are high academics to also be able to have the practical application in that case. And second, this is only a draft. It can always be changed again to something else.
I don't see any other lights. The motion before us is to release the portrait of a graduate document to the public for a 3-week comment period. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Is that you, Board Member Ellis, on the phone?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, it is.
So that motion passes. There was 1 nay vote. Okay. Next is the prioritization of our FY20 budget requests, and so we'll have Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones begin that conversation with us.
Help with. So I don't know how to get it. Is it this one? Yeah, right? Oh, she has to do it. Okay. All right. Good afternoon, Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones for the Utah State Board of Education. So we are in the iterative process. This is a process we follow pretty much to the T. It's about this time every year in the legislative session. where as staff we come to you, to the board usually, and what did occur this year again, is at the direction of the Public Education Appropriations chairs. They give us basically 3 revenue thresholds, which they've done, and I've provided to you on the spreadsheet. I'm sorry, I don't have the screen up here. So the thresholds are $350 million of new revenue, $300 million, and $250 million. So what we do is we itemize your requests with an initial, and this is subject to change. It's not, you know, the staff saying that these should be the priorities or anything like that, but we have to start somewhere. Let me just orient you to the tool that we use here. We columnize it in an ongoing and a one-time appropriation display, if you will, and then along the ongoing line, in the ongoing quadrant or portion of the tracker or spreadsheet, we give an initial 1 through whatever amounts of the different requests that you've made or proposals you've made. So you've made 16. Basically 16 proposals for ongoing money for different purposes, starting with WPU value increase and scrolling down. Then over on the one-time side, there's 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 one-time requests or proposals that you've made. Educator salary adjustments, physical improvements that's part of Safe and Healthy Schools, the USIM system, certified teacher librarians, and USDB SIMAC requests. So what's worked well in the past is we have a board member construct a initial motion, and it's been cleared with leadership to do so. So, Chair, if I may go, and we can start with that motion subject to your direction or any questions or concerns. So this is just a real quick orientation. Are there any questions about the procedural aspects of this, or what? The end state is to come out with prioritization based on the different funding thresholds that the legislature, that the Public Education Appropriation chairs have supplied to us. So we typically start with a higher amount, which is tab 350 million. There's 300 million and 250 million. What we're going to have to do is we just learned this morning about breaking out the one-time and the ongoing. So the one that you have in the administrative, the spreadsheet you have in the administrative content, is not configured like this. I mean, it still has everything listed out, but we had to configure it like this. So if you have this displayed, can you see this? Can all the board members? Okay, all right. So I just want to make sure that we're all operating on the same page as we go through this drill or this iteration. So, Chair?
Okay. We'll open it for Board Member Hanson to make that initial motion.
Thank you. Can you hear me? So I move that we approve the funding priorities in the order that they are presented here.
Okay, the motion before us is to approve the funding priorities as you see them prioritized on the spreadsheet and seconded. Is there any discussion to that motion?
Can I make a couple comments, Brittany? One thing that I wanted to explain is IC and Sorensen are on here. They're a little bit farther down the list, and then perhaps the University of Utah Reading Clinic. I feel comfortable about that because what we're looking at here is new money, and those programs already get millions of dollars every ongoing, and so this would just be new money for them. And some of those programs have been here a long time, have had funding for a long time, and some of these haven't. And so that's one of the reasons why I like the way that this is put together.
Yeah, Board Member Earl.
Yeah, can you go back up just a bit? I just have a question on one, and I'm sure you've probably already told us, so you'll have to excuse me. The one-time funding USBE, I'm sorry, I'm not really good with acronyms. Will you just remind me what that $500,000 is for again?
Sure. Gosh, in the USIMAC acronym, I'm not completely knowledgeable.
Yeah, you don't have to do the acronym, do you?
Right, but that's basically their operations for the printing of materials for blind students.
Okay.
And it's to enhance or to sustain or improve upon the capabilities with that. They actually requested $1,500,000 over a 3-year period. They did get $500,000 last year, so this is the next $500,000 increment. in that $1,500,000.
Thank you. I'm sure
that's
we've
the purpose.
done that before. I just didn't remember. And
yeah, and there are materials in your backups that show the slides and the different presentations. It's up in the public content for each one of these. They're all the slides or the backups or information that we presented to public education appropriations at your direction for your proposals. So there's a lot more detail and information in those slides and packets in the public content.
Thank you for humoring me and to clarify that. And then I just have a question on the safe and healthy schools. Remind me what the parameters are for picking personnel. Is that for the personnel for that? Is that something LEAs they're making that decision themselves, right?
Yes. If the funding distribution methodology works out the way it is, my understanding is that the local entities would be the ones to decide on whether it's mental health counselors, social workers, school nurses, all that.
It's what they need to meet their needs.
Yes, at the school level.
At the
by
school.
school.
Okay.
Yes,
all right, thank you.
Yep.
Board Member Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. Scott, would you go down again to the last few? Okay, I would like to make an amendment to the motion that we move the University of Utah Reading Clinic to number, I think it'll 14.5. I don't know what it will make it then, after Learn Platform. And one of the reasons I'm asking this is because after having a meeting with Senator Hilliard, his question was, why do we keep giving money to the University of Utah Reading Clinic? What about the U of U, and the USU and UVU and SUU? Why are we picking out one where kids can only come who live in the valley? And I know it was one of our priorities. I'd actually like to take it off, but so we'll move it down, and under 14 would be my amendment, please.
Is there a second? Is there a second to that amendment? That motion passes due to lack of second? Fails, sorry. Fails is the opposite of okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, all right. So that motion has been made and seconded to move the University of Utah Reading Clinic to below the Learn platform. Did I articulate that correctly, Board Member Belknap? Okay. So that motion before us, is there any discussion to that motion? I have lights on. I just want to know if they're speaking to that motion of amendment. So seat number 4, is that Board Member Davis? Is your light on? Yes, ma'am.
So do they do at one point I thought I understood that they did some outreach. Is it only localized to Salt Lake City students coming to their physical facility? I'm trying to read your lips.
We'll have somebody
Can she answer that question?
We'll have somebody answer that question. Superintendent, did you have
They do actually have outreach in terms of training and support. I have actually have a neighbor who is currently in their program being trained, and she works out in schools. So they do have a clinic where students come, but they also they do a lot of their clinical work right at the school level. And if I may just address, it would be great if other universities would gain that expertise and have clinics as well. So maybe that's a recommendation that could be made to the University of Utah to work with other universities to replicate it, because it's a very intense, specific reading methodology that was developed at the University of Utah, and that's why they keep getting the money. So if others will replicate that or come up with it, it would be awesome, because then we could spread that around.
Board Member Linda Hampton?
I was going to say much of the same thing. The University of Utah goes out throughout the state and trains teachers to do this. And they have an amazing program, and it's only word of mouth because they're afraid if they tell too many people about it. They already have huge waiting lists, and if they tell too many people about it, then they'll just be inundated. So I feel very comfortable giving them this money. I took my son there. Somebody finally told me about this when he was in high school, and I took him, and he never got off the waiting list. But they helped us as much as they could, and it is a fabulous program. And so this, along with the intervention for reading that we're doing, I think would really help our kids who are really having difficulty reading. So, and like I said, it's not just here in this area, but it's throughout the state.
Okay, Board Member Cannon.
This is an item that former State Senator Karen Morgan was very interested in bringing forward to the board. When she was up here on the Hill, she was a huge champion of education and in particular reading, and she's now involved with the reading clinic up there at the University of Utah. As I look at our state and recognize that we only have 49% of our kids that are reading on grade level by third grade, I think there's a critical need, and these folks are making headway and innovating and really doing all they can to help our kids with reading. So I speak against the motion and in favor of keeping it in the priority position it is.
Board Member Belknap.
Okay, after the discussion this morning in appropriations, that is not what was stated, that the kids have to be bused and come to the U. That's exactly what was said in approps today. And if they're doing training, can you tell me, when you say all over the state, are they really doing training in Kanab and Moab and those other places? Are they really going, or is it still just hitting the valley area again? I'd be really curious to see that.
Superintendent?
I think there are varying levels of what they do, to be fair. I mean, I think they have, they base it on early steps and next steps, and so there's some training that they do for teachers in districts, in LEAs, and then they have some really intensive work right at the clinic. So I think it's fairly layered. I'm not an expert. I just know that I have referred plenty of people to there and been part of their training. So they do a variety of things, for sure.
Okay, seeing no other discussion. Oh, go ahead, Deputy Superintendent Jones.
I'd be remiss just to advise on the statewide advising corps, which is number 15 on the list. That's actually a higher ed proposal that was brought to you more along the lines of just for support. So I would recommend moving it to the end, right, to maybe number 16. It still shows your support, but it's a higher ed centric request, so I think it still shows support, but if we get to the point in this process, or the legislature does, where, it's a prioritization, I don't think it would hurt, but it still demonstrates your support for the item. That might just kind of a housekeeping thing.
So while he's refreshing the screen, the motion before the board is to amend by moving the University of Utah Reading Clinic to below the Learn platform. All in favor say aye. And those opposed? Okay. Okay, so I'll say this again. All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. Any opposed? Aye. Okay. Okay. So will the ayes raise their hands, please?
Ellis.
Okay, so we have Lear, Scott, Hansen, Ellison, Bolter, Newell, Board Member Belknap, Board Member Lisa Cummins, Board Member Mark Hansen, and I'm an aye. There's 9. That motion passes. Do you want me to continue? Okay. Okay. Would you be willing, Deputy Superintendent Jones, would you be willing to update these as they come before us?
Sure.
And I don't know if anybody would like to make a motion in regard to Deputy Jones's suggestion, but we'll go to, oh, sorry, what was that? So, okay, so the motion before us and seconded is to move the statewide advising corps to, I'm going to say that word wrong, the advising corps to the last position. Is there any discussion to that motion? Board Member Belknap? Did you want to speak to that, Board Member Belknap? No. Okay. Okay, so all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Aye. That motion passes unanimously. Board Member Gravitt.
Okay, this is kind of a long shot, but I would like to move that we reconsider the board's elimination of school nurses from the board's priorities. It was suggested that perhaps Representative Ward's healthy safety bill or Representative Eliason's similar bill could include the specific $5 million or maybe $3 million without the board's priorities. That's kind of hard to do. I was thinking that
Board Member Gravitt?
Yeah.
So do you mind if we state the motion first, and then I'll give you an opportunity to speak? So is there a second? Okay, so the motion before the board is to reprioritize. Do you have a specific spot on the list that you want to place it?
I don't.
Okay.
I just at the end, I just want it on there somewhere.
Okay, so the motion before the board is to prioritize the school nurses at the end of our ongoing funds list. Okay, is there any discussion? And we'll let you speak to your motion. Go ahead.
So I've just been thinking about this since we eliminated it, and I think sometimes we forget the kinds of training that school nurses have. They can help students with psychological problems, plus they have medical training. Every year when I look at my rolls, I can look down and see red marks for students who have various medical issues. And I was looking at them specifically yesterday, and I couldn't believe the numbers of students in every single one of my classes, 10 plus, that have various medical issues. And I just think if we pass up an opportunity for students and schools to benefit from this, we would be remiss. And I wanted to take a chance to get those nurses back.
Okay, Board Member Davis?
I would like to speak to that motion, and I would probably put that in between 9 and 10, numbers 9 and 10, as a proposal. But I was just in a school yesterday, and a girl had an accident on the playground. I had a carrier in with another aide, and it was a mess, and there was no one in there that had any medical expertise, and the secretary's trying to figure out what to do, and I see it all over, and to take out school nursing, even though it could be included in what we've talked about, I think it really is something that we need to think about and keep as a priority. And I will also add, I had a student once that had a severe medical issue, and I could only find one adult in my whole building out of teachers and aides that was willing to go to Primary Children's Hospital to get the training to do what was required to care for that little girl on a daily basis so she could go to school with her peers. It's important.
Okay. Board Member Linda Hansen?
Just a question probably for Scott or someone. The $30 million we've asked for, school nurses for safe and healthy schools, that's the healthy part, right, is the nurses. So we're asking for that they be given the opportunity to have school nurses through that program, right? So that $30 million could include also nurses. Is that right?
Yes, that's my understanding. I'd defer to Deputy Superintendent Norman to expand on that. But the understanding that I'm at right now, with whatever bills are open, the intent is back to Board Member Earl's question, is that ongoing funding would be utilized for the local board to make decisions on how to staff those schools, and school nurses could be an integral part of that.
Okay, so some of them already have school nurses, and so they could decide whether they need school nurses or not with that 30
The feedback I get is just, if I may, Chair. The feedback I get from that, answering your question through the chair, is that that's what they want, is that flexibility, because there are school nurses in some schools, and then they would be able to say, well, we'll put one here, using the amount of funding that they get.
Okay, so the LEAs are asking for the flexibility of having the opportunity to decide.
That's my understanding.
And so that's part of the $30 million, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
It could potentially be used for that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Board Member Scott Hansen.
Also along the same lines, I'd like to speak against the motion and in favor of giving the LEAs the maximum flexibility with this money. Also, I believe it dilutes our presentation of priorities if we have two priorities that are dealing with essentially the same ask. And so I would speak in favor of having this be included in the safe and healthy schools where I believe it should reside.
Board Member Mark Hansen.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I'm going to speak against this also because of the flexibilities that schools have presently and then also what they'll have in the future. I see it in another additional line also in the WPU where they can assess exactly what their needs and also their opportunities. And so I think it's great that it stands out that there's a need in that, but that came out in school safety and in lots of other places too. But our board are very much aware of that need, and I like that flexibility, and I would prefer to see it on that WPU and these other methods and have a separate line item that creates additional oversight, and so I'm speaking against it.
Board Member Lear.
And I would be speaking in favor of it. I think if it were to be included in Representative Ward's bill or Representative Elison's bill, I think having it on the board's priority list would make it easier and more influential for the nurses then to approach those representatives and be able to have it specifically included, because I feel like the nurses have psychological training as well in some degree. Psychologists have no training in how to give medication or help a student with diabetes. I think it would just be a really important message for then the nurses to take to the other representatives to try to have that specified or identified specifically in one of the other school safety bills. Because as I've heard it discussed, including this morning, it's very glossed over about who those professionals can be, and school nurses are never mentioned.
There's one more light of discussion, but before we do, I just wanted to clarify the motion was to add this to the bottom of the list, but I didn't recall that there was a specific amount that you wanted to add. So the prioritization. Okay, so $3 million is the motion. Okay, sorry. It was the ongoing list. So, Deputy Superintendent Jones, if you want to answer to that.
So 2 points to this motion is there is the existing school nurse program going on right now. That would continue. The previous request was $5 million, so of ongoing money. But if you want to change it, I just want to clarify that.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Fine. Okay, Board Member Belknap.
This morning in Appropriations, President Elison, he just became President. Representative Elison did say he was very specific in his bill that he is going to include school nurses. He was very clear on that. Representative Wards does not, and he said we're going to have to work to get that. I really appreciate the fact that this goes to local control, and if then the nurses in that area can go to their local board members and discuss the importance and why. What are they missing and what pieces, rather than trying to come to a state level. Thanks.
Remember, Lisa Cummins.
Scott, could you tell me, you said there was already an existing school nurse program. Do you know how much money is going to that program right now currently?
Chair, can we call it Natalie? She probably has that information. I don't know off the top of my head how much it is. So
yes.
Yeah. We've got the book. So $1,200,000. Both Deborah and Natalie are Scott Whisperers. So. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't see any other lights for discussion. So the motion, the amendment before the board is to add school nurses at the end of the ongoing list in the amount of $3 million. There, all in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? No. No. Okay, so the amendment before the board is to add a prioritization of $3 million at the end of our list for school nurses. Will the ayes please raise their hands? Okay. Board Member Gravitt, Board Member Lear, Board Member Davis, Board Member Cannon. So that motion fails. Okay. Okay, we're going to pause this discussion for just a moment. We have a representative here, Representative Christofferson. I'd like to invite him to come forward to discuss HB 236, Teacher Salary Supplement Amendment. Welcome, Representative. Oh, sorry, just one second. Let me get the microphone. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Appreciate the invitation to be here and talk about HB 236. This is the Teacher Salary Supplement Amendments, and how this came to my attention is that I've got a constituent that came to me and said, I'm teaching math at Lone Peak, and I have a pretty good program here, and as I checked into that, he's got a great program. He's been featured in the local newspaper, and his classes are always getting great grades, and things. It's an example of how you'd want a math class to be run. And he says, but I've got a problem. Other teachers are teaching math get the teacher salary supplement, which is $4,100 plus their benefits on top of that, and I don't get that. And so that's kind of how this started. And as I got looking into it, there are quite a few people, almost 1,000 people that would, well, there's more than that actually, but that don't qualify, even though they're teaching the same course. They don't qualify for this incentive or this bonus, and it actually becomes a disincentive to them. And so I've been trying to solve this inequity the last 2 or 3 years. The problem is, the bottom line is the fiscal note, how much it costs. And then last year, the special education was added on to the list of teachers who get the salary supplement. And the program's great because it takes the top, the list of criticality, which the school board produces. You may have seen that, of teachers that are hard or courses that are hard to find teachers for. And that's math, science, and special ed. And so it incentivizes teachers to go into that field. But the fiscal note on this to bring equity to those who are teaching those courses who don't get that salary supplement was almost $17 million. And that's a huge ask. It needs to happen, but at this point I'm thinking it wouldn't pass. It's got to be bite-sized. So I cut that in half, thinking, well, maybe I can introduce this as a half supplement amount, at least to get it through the legislature. That was still over $8 million. And so I thought, and I talked to several people. I said, where are we going to have to be to fund this? And I thought, well, maybe $4 or $5 million. So what we looked at is, well, maybe we give the full supplement to those teachers who have endorsements or qualified other ways, that they get the full supplement after 10 years of teaching in that course, which is not really what I wanted to do, but I think it's something that we can get our foot in the door with and get, so the supplement funding request is $4.9 million. I think we can do that this year, but we just need the support from everyone to talk to the Appropriations Committee. And this will solve a huge inequity. It will give some incentive for those teachers to stick around and to be involved in the program. And hopefully, in coming years, we can chip away at that so they all get the salary supplement. So this is kind of a step in that direction. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Okay, yeah. Board Member Belknap.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say that I certainly hope I have a whole dozen of those flowers at my house tonight.
Oh, thank you.
So, I'll
have a dozen legislators show up, and
okay.
we all got one.
They'll just take them. They'll just take them. Okay. I was really interested in this bill, and one of the reasons being is because the three teachers or the three groups of teachers who are receiving this are our hardest to fill classes, and so I really appreciate that you're not trying to extend this to additional teachers, which would be lovely, actually, but that you're staying there, and that I have heard numerous stories as well. Level 4 math teachers are not receiving this, and they're being courted by other places to come work there for triple the amount of money, but they love teaching, so they're staying. So thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Board Member Lear. Board Member Lear, did you have a comment? Or
oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I did. I'm unclear, and if this is a dumb question, I apologize, but I'm unclear what's different about this bill. The group of teachers seems to be the same. I'm unclear what is you're changing through this bill.
So right now, those who qualify for teacher salary supplement are those who graduate with a degree in math, computer science, or science or computer science and special ed.
Right.
Those who don't get it are those who come in different ways. You know, if they graduated in a different subject and got certificates or endorsements or whatever to qualify to teach that course, they're still teaching the same course and they're qualified. If they weren't qualified, they shouldn't be teaching there. But they still teach those courses, but they are not eligible for the teacher salary supplement.
So just to make sure just to bring clarity, I was just wondering if that would be people who are alternative routes to licensing people, or even theoretically a district-specific person who ended up teaching this class. Is that either one of those kinds of people could then get this supplement?
The way I understand it, that's the case. So if you're qualified as well, we've defined some things, and there's been a few things changed, and so I want to make sure I state this right. But there's a new term that's called salary sup. I should go look at that, but it's the salary supplement qualified.
Supplement approved assignment.
Approved teacher, yeah.
Supplement approved assignment, yes.
Yeah, and so the school board has the responsibility to say, to get approved, you need these certificates or these endorsements or these other courses that are equivalent, and they do that up front, and usually they do that just to be able to teach that course. But you have to go through that process to make sure that you're qualified to teach, and then the school board will give you that designation.
Thank you. One short follow-up, and then I thought I heard something this morning about the LEA, where the person teaching the LEA would have the authority or the ability to decide how much would go to different teachers. Is that right, or did I just make that up or hear it wrong?
No, I mean, I think they can help pay teachers now if they want to, if they have special circumstances. But what this says is it's $4,100 plus benefits that go on top of that.
For each of those supplement approved assignments.
Right.
Okay.
And there are about, for this appropriation, the 4.9, there are about almost 1,000 people that would fall into that category.
Okay,
thank you. So there are quite a few more that have less than 10 years experience that would not be getting this at this time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Board Member Earl.
Is it on? Okay. So if I understand, then those that have had experience, they meet their criterion and at the experience level, right?
Right.
They would be the ones that would qualify for this additional funding. And it seems to me that we've had a number of individuals that have sent us emails recently that have said, please look at this because I I don't qualify despite the fact I'm meeting the requirements of my local districts, and yet I'm meeting a special need that we have, an additional need. So I would like to speak in favor of this bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Davis?
Thanks for your work on this, Representative Christopherson. Hi.
Hi, Cindy.
How are you? Good to see you. What percentage of teachers that are teaching these courses fall into this category that are currently not getting the stipend, the extra pay? That off the top of your head?
I'm not sure, but based on the fiscal note, I mean, if you took 17 million divided by, I think it's around $5,200 or $5,400, that would tell you all the number of people who are not getting it who should be qualified. Now, as a percentage of those who currently get it, I couldn't tell you that right now.
Okay. So roughly a third, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, there's a lot. It's more than I expected. I thought it'd be just a few, but it's a lot.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look into that. That's a good question.
If we have specific questions, we have Travis Rawlings here who may, I don't want to put him on the spot, he may have some answers to those questions.
Yeah, Travis could tell you. Come on up.
Put you in the hot seat, Travis.
I apologize for being late. Could we restate this question, please? I'm sorry.
Do you happen to know what percentage of our teachers teaching on these contracts are not getting that extra money in?
So I'm going to have to do a little mental math here. So the current bill requires the bill. There's anywhere around 3,000 currently eligible, and so I think there's literally another 3,000 that would be added if you did the, no matter how many years of experience. I think there's about another, I'd say, 20 between 2,500 and 3,000.
I just did a rough calculation. I took 17 million divided by, I think with benefits, it'd be about 5,400.
Yeah.
I came up with 3,150, so that's close.
So more like half than a third.
Half, yeah. Or more than that.
Thank you.
Okay, Board Member Linda Hansen.
I just want to, I know I'm going to get calls, and so I just want to ask this question straight out. So people who are getting it now will continue to get it. This will just be more people that haven't gotten it in the past will be able to get it.
That's correct. Right on.
Okay, Board Member Gravitt.
I was just kind of speaking to what Board Member Davis was saying in referring to how many wouldn't get it. So if my school is anything like that is representative, we have 6 special ed teachers, only 1 qualifies now because the others have endorsements. 1 is through ARL. They've been teaching 20 years, 10 years, 15 years. We need them, and so I appreciate your work on this.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't see any other, Board Member Scott Hansen.
Senator, I appreciate your work on this. I just had a question about the specific language on the 10 years of experience. I'm just not finding that in the copy of the bill that I have. Could you point me to a section or some line?
I don't think that substitute is out yet. I mean, I think it just barely became public, and I actually had to present the appropriations because the appropriations process is going on earlier, so it should be out, but I don't have a copy of it either.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
There are no more questions from board members. Thank you very much, Representative Christopherson, for your time and for your answering questions today.
Thank you, and if I may say, if there's any help that if this is something you want to pursue, it's critical right now because the Public Education Committee is prioritizing tomorrow. So if you can help me with that, I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. We will return to our conversation regarding our legislative budget priorities. Okay, Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones.
So I did make the updates as we've gone, so if board members do feel like they want to have their own working copy, it's posted to the administrative content under the agenda item for board doc, or within board docs. The other thing too is we could reorient to the worksheet itself. I just want to make sure, so we did make the changes. If you look in the $350,000 iteration, there's approximately there's 268,200,500 of ongoing requests, so that leaves a balance of 81,790, roughly 500. But then we also need to go through the one-time. That's my understanding too, ma'am, right? Is we need to make sure we look at the priorities for one-time as well, or no?
Okay, Board Member Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the one-time funding, I would like to make a motion that we switch 5 and 4 around, and I'll speak to that in a minute.
Okay, I'm sorry.
To change 4 and 5. That's my motion, and I'll speak to it.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, the motion. Okay, so the amendment before us is to switch 4 and 5 on our one-time request. So it would switch certified teacher librarians with USDB's USIMAC request. Is there any discussion to that motion, that amendment? Like, you go ahead and speak to that.
Thank you, Chair. And not that I don't think certified librarians are critical to our students, but our students at USDB cannot learn or read without the USIMAC, without their Braille books, and without the ability to do that. And so that's the only without having USIMAC. So that's why I would like to.
Okay. Board Member Earl, are you wanting to discuss this, or is your light on for a lady? Okay, that's fine. Board Member Lear.
And precisely for the reason that Laura mentioned, I believe that 500,000 will be in there because it's a legal requirement. I don't think it's going to be, it is. They have to have the same materials. Those students have to have the same materials that their peers have. But I don't believe it will be dropped from this priority list. I am concerned about certified librarians not being included in this list, which I think are just about as important as school nurses.
Okay, seeing no other discussion, the amendment before us is to switch 4 and 5, certified teacher librarians and USDB USIMAC. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, will the ayes please raise their hands? Okay, Board Member Davis, Board Member Newell, Board Member Belknap, Board Member Lisa Cummins, Board Member Earl, Board Member Linda Hansen, Board Member Huntsman, and who is online? Can you just say your name if you were an aye?
Lisa.
Board Member Earl, and I'm an aye. Okay. Okay. Okay, so that motion passes. Okay, Board Member Earl?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we add somewhere, and I'm not exactly sure where that priority needs to be, but that we add supplemental teachers, supplemental salary that was just talked about by Christopherson to our list.
Do you have the amount?
4.9 is what he said, or is it 4.1?
We're looking right now.
Oh, okay.
The amount is $4,795,096.
And that was one time or ongoing? Ongoing. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. So the motion before us is to add to the bottom of our ongoing list 4.795.096 million in ongoing funds to support the.
We put it at 15.
Okay, sorry. So put it at number 15 for the TSSP. That would call the TSS expansion of the TSSP program. Is there any discussion to that motion? Board Member Belknap?
Yeah, I'd like to amend that motion to move it after 14 and also fix 15 to say USDB.
I'm a good accountant, not a good speller.
Okay, so you're wanting to amend the amendment to move it up one notch higher? One. So let's clarify where we want this. So you want this to be right below USDB's opt-out funding?
No,
right
above
it. Is that the same thing you were saying, Board Member? Okay, so we want it up one from where your green square is right now. Okay, that's the motion before us. Is there any discussion to the motion? Okay, seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Aye. Okay, so that motion passes unanimously. Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones.
We have one more item that was put on the agenda for consideration by the board to support. Director Britton is here from the Child Nutrition Program section. It's a pilot program, is my understanding, slightly over $1 million. There's some items, there's a whole bunch of material in your backups, we get that, but it's all the presentation materials and all that too. So if you could go into Board Docs, and if you scroll up in the public content, it is titled, it's V.4 LFAC appropriations. I hadn't opened that one right there. Appropriations request. It's Local Farmers First, a triple win for agriculture. It's displayed for you as well. Up in the upper right-hand corner is the total request. Chair, if you want to invite Director Britton up to talk to it, or a little bit further. My understanding is there is actually a bill that's being heard or processed through a different committee, but she would probably have a better status on it. No? Oh, it's an appropriation request. Sorry, not a bill.
Yes, if you'd like to come up, Director Britton, that would be fine.
Kathleen Britton, Child Nutrition Programs Director at USBE. Out of this $1 million, it's $250,000 that would be allocated just through the Department of Ed for to buy local produce, and it would be funneled through to the LEAs that purchased. It would be on a non-competitive grant that they would apply for, and then they would have to show documentation to get reimbursed. Kind of a win-win for farmers and for the school districts to serve local food. So right now, it's still an appropriation at the Utah Department of Ag, and they'll find out later tomorrow where it stands. Any questions?
Board Member Belknap?
Sorry, Chair. My question is, are you asking this out of education funds or general funds?
It's general funds.
Thank you.
Board Member Lisa Cummins.
Thank you, Chair. This may be out of this bill, but is there also a plan to do more education in schools about agriculture and seasons and food? I have a friend who is very much into gardening and agriculture, and she works at a local farm that distributes local foods to schools and community and things. And she's had people come up to them very upset that they can't get strawberries in the middle of February, right? That they don't understand that strawberries don't grow in February yet. They're just starting to come out of the ground. So is there a way to, is there a program being crafted or eventually in the future that will talk about how we get our food and the seasons that they come and all of that?
So currently, through the U.S. Department of Ag in the Child Nutrition Programs, there's a farm-to-school portion of it that we have gone out to and worked with the LEAs on farm-to-school and building gardens at the schools and educating the students. Then through the Utah Department of Ag was asked last year through the legislature to develop the local food advisory council, who has been working with our department in getting that information out to the schools also. As you all saw, walking into USBE in the planter part last year, we planted a garden, and that was to demonstrate to school districts that it didn't take a lot of space to build a garden and to educate students. So our child nutrition program at USBE has been educating the LEAs and the food service directors to share that information.
Okay, great. Thank you. Board Member Earl?
So I'm guessing this is just not just local produce, but it's the intent is to get fresh produce in. And how is that? I'm just wondering how that program works. Is there like a bid type of a thing? I mean, how do farmers know, and how do schools know what to ask for? Does that make sense? So what's the coordination there?
If you go on the Child Nutrition website for USBE, it has a link to Farm to Network. And on there, we've shared that with all the school districts on local farmers that provide produce and other beef, turkey to school districts. So we've been building those networks within the last 2 years. This allocation is to encourage more of that because it is more costly for school districts to buy local than it is to buy it through a distributor.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any. Board Member Linda Hampton.
So can I make a motion? So I move that we add this request right under the TSS. Oh, it's general fund, so we don't need this. Okay, just inform. Sorry, I understood, but we do support it. So I don't know how you want us to.
During our motion support of the, I guess there isn't a
bill
or a bill.
There isn't a bill to support, so I don't know how we
Deputy
do that.
Superintendent Jones, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, so the intent of bringing this in front of you is, first of all, to make you aware that there was an appropriations request, to specify that it is coming out of the general fund, so that if the appropriation is passed or awarded or appropriated, that you know that staff would be receiving that funding, to administer the funding. That's really what this is about. Is, Board Member Ellis has, talked to me about saying, hey, whenever actions are taking place in other committees or things are going on, we want to make sure we're aware of it. So we don't feel like, staff doesn't necessarily recommend that you add it to your list of priorities. It's just that you need to be aware of what's also going on in other committees and that would affect your staff, right?
Would it help for us to give it a vote of support?
Yes, yeah. I mean, it would help that you support it, and by doing so, then they know that that if they do appropriate it, you've already seen it and know that your staff would be administering the program. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So I move that we give this a vote of support.
Is there a second? Okay, so the motion before us is to support the local Farmers First appropriation request. Is there any discussion to that motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? There's one. Yes. Board members. Those of you on the phone, were you both an aye or a nay? Sorry.
I was an aye. Michelle?
Okay. Board Member Bolter, are you still on the phone?
Yes, I was an aye.
Okay, thank you. See, that motion passes. Okay. If there are no other motions to be made regarding our legislative priorities, we can move on to discussion of bills. Oh, I'm sorry. We'd have to go back to our original motion, which would be to approve it. So I don't see any lights, or excuse me, Board Member Davis.
I have a new one. I was
okay,
ready.
An amendment? Okay, thank you.
I want to move to support a different bill. I thought you were moving
okay,
to
I'm
that
sorry.
portion.
I forgot to get us where we needed to be, so give me just 1 minute. Okay, so the motion, we're back to our main motion, which is to approve our legislative priorities request list as stated in the document in front of you. Is there any further discussion to that motion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Okay, thank you very much, Deputy Superintendent Jones. So the next portion is for discussion on legislation.
Right, thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Just as a reminder to board members, we'll have discussion time where we can talk and discuss questions, and then we'll leave the last 20 minutes for motions if you would like to make motions on those. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Madam Chair, I wanted to point your attention to a new document that's been uploaded to Board Docs, not new as in the last 5 minutes. It's been there since either last night or this morning, but new as in it wasn't part of our legislative backup the last 2 meetings that we've had. The title of the document, and Jeff will be showing it in just a minute as soon as he gets connected, but it's called 2019 General Session Board Legislative Request to amend statute. And I wanted to remind you that the items on here are concepts that staff brought to you for attention, mostly back in October, November, and December. Is that you?
I'll make it
Oh, good times. All right. And for those who are listening, because I'm sure this is, I forgot that we're live streaming right now, so there may be people who are not listening. Deputy Superintendent of Policy Andrew Stallings and Jeff.
Yeah. Jeff Van Holten, Policy Advisor to the Board.
And so this document here is a reminder of the requests that were presented to you, mostly in October, November, and December, of things that staff members recommended that we work on with legislators. And you'll see now that there are bills that have resulted in some of that work. And so we will go through some of those different bills later on. And if you have any questions, we will keep uploading the bills as they get numbered. I anticipate a couple more bills being numbered shortly, especially on number 9 will be coming out soon. And we're working on all of these. So then also, as a reminder, we've got the list up of the bills that we'll be discussing today. We'd like to go a little bit out of order, or in order, but then bring certain bills to your attention based on feedback we may have received from legislators and others for the board to discuss. And so we'll be looking at bills number 1, 2, 4, 7, 13, and 15 first. And I apologize, I did not want to change the order last minute, so I kept the version, but we'll go through that order and then come back to the beginning. And as always, if there are board members who have certain bills that you would like us to review or you would like to prioritize at the chair's discretion, please feel free to interrupt us, because this is your meeting and we want to make it helpful for you. Before we start with the list of bills, there is one staff request, Jeff, if you can pull that up, on board docs that came to our attention this week. It's related to something that the Student Data Privacy Policy Group discussed over about a year ago, shortly after the session last year, but then we forgot to follow up on it. Currently in code, there's a requirement that if a student has been suspended or expelled, that the LEA, the district or charter school, keep a notation of that. There's also a provision in there that says it has to also be noted on their transcript. Number one, we don't think LEAs are doing this. We don't think they're putting that notation on their transcript, and staff don't recommend that that be the practice. If a student is suspended or expelled, the staff recommendation is not to include that on their transcript. So if the board, if board members agree, we would seek an amendment, just as this language states. And one bill that could fit in would be Senator Andrade's SB 164, but there may be other bills, potentially the truancy. I don't know if that depending on the topic or the title, it could go in the absenteeism and truancy bill as well. And so if you all, we'd just like to, if you have any questions about that request, you can see it's pretty simple. It would just strike those 2 lines that are in red there.
Board Member Belknap?
So, Chair, I don't know if we need a motion or without objection to have the board move forward with this.
Maybe just make a motion, and
okay.
that would be the cleanest.
All right, thank you. Then I'd like to make a motion that we move forward with staff working with someone to add this to one of their bills.
Is there a second to that motion? Okay, so the motion before us is to request staff that to work through this amendment in current statute. Is there any discussion to that motion? Board Member Lear.
I'm not sure if I'm discussing to the form. Is that to the bill?
Right. So the form is our staff, how they got that before us as a board member. So on the bottom of the form is the amendment that they would be seeking in statute. And that's what our motion is to seek that statutory amendment.
And here's my question. Mm-hmm. Since there are places in state law and federal law that allow a school not to enroll a student who's been expelled, would that not frustrate, would taking this information off of a student's transcript then frustrate that school's right to not enroll that student?
And that's a good question. That's probably more of a question of practice of how districts transfer records. Ideally, I would think that as a student is moving from one district to another or one charter to another, that they not only transmit a transcript, but they should ideally also be transmitting other data like disciplinary records, this type of information. But that is not, I apologize, I don't know, I don't have that knowledge.
Oh, and can I follow up for a minute? My concern is this is already a ongoing problem where schools, both charter and traditional, don't get this information in a timely way. And it puts the children, and sometimes parents are not inclined to provide this information for obvious reasons. So that puts the district, the school or the district where the child seeks to enroll at a serious disadvantage. It puts sometimes children at risk, depending on why this person was suspended, and expelled is the language in federal law. So I'm really reluctant to get rid of this and without any other certainty about where this information will be provided.
And Board Member or Chair and Board Member Lair, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask Whitney Phillips, who's our Chief Privacy Officer, to give some background on the discussion and why it might be a good policy to not have that on a student's transcript, because then it would affect them not just maybe during their public education, but then post-education and their ability to get into higher ed, et cetera. So.
Thanks. Whitney Phillips, Chief Privacy Officer. To speak to your point, I think we're getting a few definitions confounded because there's transcripts and then there's cumulative file. The cumulative file is what is transferred from one school to another, whether it be within the district or outside the district. The transcript is something that is sent on to institutions of higher education, for example, and this is where the concern comes in. As a practical matter, most LEAs are not noting suspensions or expulsions on the transcript. So they're not aware of this. So they're not doing this, as far as I know. I haven't looked at all transcripts from across all LEAs, but as a practical matter, they're not really doing this anyway.
Can I ask Whitney a question?
Yes, ma'am.
And are you quite sure? I mean, in all the years I've worked in education, I've not heard a really clear distinction between transcript and cum file. And in fact, they're both called by a number of different names. Are you quite sure that that's a clear distinction for LEAs?
No, you make a good point there. What is frustrating is this last week we have been investigating what different LEAs define as a transcript and what they define as a cumulative folder, and there isn't a consistent definition that we've been able to find. And this is something that we're actually going to bring to the next advisory group.
Well, just to conclude, if I can, Chair, I'm not comfortable with taking this information off anything until we know that it is on something that can be clearly transmitted to an LEA where a student seeks to enroll, because otherwise we put other children at considerable risk. And once they're enrolled, it's unlikely for courts then to let the schools unenroll the students.
One other thing, Board Member Lehrer, that might be helpful to know is this wouldn't prohibit an LEA from including this information on a transcript. It's just no longer required. So if LEA districts and charters felt it was helpful means of communication, they could continue to do so. I would state that my recollection of the discussion when it was discussed by our policy group is that our LEA reps supported this and actually felt that they aren't currently complying with it, and they wanted the change. But you could verify that with those LEA representatives on our policy group if you'd like.
That's helpful information. Thank you.
Board Member Newell.
I like the exclusion of this language for a number of different reasons. The primary reason is that, over the growth of these students, changes in situations we're not completely aware of. And it may be that they are improving their situation by moving to another school. The notation by the LEAs, I think, is sufficient. And if we go beyond that, we're going to create some issues there that may be long-lasting in the life of the student.
Board Member Lisa Cummins.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cummins. I agree with Board Member Newell. This is something that I discussed heavily that I didn't want. I don't like the idea of students' mistakes following them for the rest of their lives, even into the workforce. These children must be forgiven at some point, and if we don't take this off, they will never be forgiven. So I support this.
Board Member Scott Hansen.
I believe that certainly there's a point where information should be taken away from the record. But I'm wondering, when we're talking about discrimination by institutions of higher education, if some of this information maybe isn't relevant to the institutions of higher education, and there is maybe a danger, maybe you can help me understand, of passing on a problem with a child who has acted out and been expelled for a gun in a locker or something like that, where the higher institution or the institution of higher education would not be made aware of that kind of thing. Can you speak to that for me?
We contacted only one university, Corby Easton did, and asked them about their application process in Utah, and they did not request or require any kind of disciplinary information from the student or from the institution. But this language now, they would get that information in their official transcript regardless of whether the application required it.
Thank you.
Board Member Davis?
I'm just struggling because I agree that schools need to have this information when students are transferring within schools, but I really do think it's appropriate
in a cumulative file and an LEA record. I mean, to put it on a transcript, I'm struggling. And I'm also, you know, suspension and expulsion typically are two different things. You're going to have a ninth grader, you know, punch back at someone who threw a punch and be suspended for 3 days by policy and have that, you know, show up without details or explanations on the transcript. And when you're talking about expulsion, often that's a bigger story often, where there are things required to get back into the system, therapy sessions, things like that. I mean, you're talking about bigger issues. But to have a suspension on a transcript, I'm really struggling with that.
Member Belknap?
Thank you, Chair. I think a couple of things. We're probably talking about their academic transcript here. And I'm wondering if we need to be more specific on what kind of transcript we're talking about. And are we talking about a notation recorded in a CUME file? Maybe we need to decide maybe some of this is okay to leave in there in a CUME file. The university doesn't take that CUME file, but they do take a transcript of their academics. So I don't know, maybe we need to reword.
With the research that we've been doing over the definition of what a transcript is and a cumulative file is across the districts, I think the potential of creating a board rule of what those are could be in our future. Board Member Linda Hansen.
Question, Whitney, or maybe Angie, whichever one. I think that isn't it at age 18 that you can ask to have your CUME file expunged or just destroyed? I mean, there's at some age that you can ask to have that, but your transcript is like forever, right?
That's a good question. I think there is record retention schedules on part of your academic record. There's transcripts, cumulative file. There are certain requirements to hold on to data because of auditing purposes from the federal and state government. But I'm not aware of a student being able to ask for the file to be removed.
I think we talked about that. At least while I've been on the board, there has been either a bill or a rule or something where we allowed them to go in and ask to have their data removed from their CUME file.
Are you referring to the expungement for discipline records?
No, I'm talking about just if they're already out of the system, they're over 18. I think parents or students can come and ask that their files no longer be in the school system.
Well, I believe that's R277487, and that describes that schools must follow the state archives record retention schedule, and that if they are compliant with that, and it is not a conflict, that parents or students over the age of 18 can request that data be expunged if they feel like it is inaccurate, misleading, or in any way a violation of their privacy. And so I think maybe is that what you're referring to?
Maybe so. I just remember that we talked about that, but a transcript would not be something that ever could be expunged. It would be because, you know, when you're 50 years old and you want to go to college, you still have to go get back and get your high school transcript, right?
Yeah,
sometimes.
The transcript does have
those tests, right?
Yes, the transcript does have a record retention schedule. I believe it's for 20 years. I'd have to look into that. Right now we have an advisory group looking at record retention schedules, and we're working with our records officer on that.
Thank you.
We don't have much time in our meeting, and so I know we have a couple people who wanted to make comments on this particular topic, but if you have something very specific to ask or to move, that would be okay. Very targeted question towards the motion would be fantastic. Board Member Lisa Cummins. For the motion, which is to move forward asking legislation to change this statute.
It's a targeted question. Can I answer? just to clarify, can parents go in and have detailed information of disciplinary actions towards their child taken off their record?
If it is not in conflict with existing record retention schedules, which is based on requirements to preserve records for audit purposes, then if they feel like it is in violation of the student's privacy, yes, they can request that those records be expunged. Or inaccurate or misleading.
Okay.
Board Member Lear?
I'd just like to make a substitute motion that we move off of this and get more information for next week, and including the information with assistance from the AAGs of when records can be amended or expunged, and which rules allow that. I would also like to hear maybe a more specific comment from the LEA folks that you said gave you counsel, Angie, and then we can make a more informed decision.
Is that a motion to postpone till next Thursday?
Yes.
Okay. So all in favor of postponing this motion? Is there a second? Okay, thank you. All in favor of postponing this until next Thursday, please say. Is there any discussion?
Aye.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, ayes, please raise your hand. Okay, that is Board Member Gravitt, Board Member Lear, Board Member Scott Hansen, Board Member Belknap, Board Member Cannon, Board Member Linda Hansen, Board Member Huntsman. Can you please say your name if you were an aye online?
Bolter.
I'm an aye. Okay, so that motion passes. Okay. Thank you, Angie.
There we go. Sorry.
Okay.
I touched this and I didn't mean to. We'll go ahead and move to the list then, to the legislative review list. The first bill, SB 143, we had a request from Senator Escamilla to review this bill with you, and she is hoping for a vote of support to the bill. And just as background, we had 3 different USBE staff members who did work on a group with USDB staff also, as well as Department of Health, et cetera. So our staff member, who's a nurse, Betty Sue Hinkson, Laura Lee Gillespie representing SPED, and Jennifer Thronson representing English language arts, all participated in the development of this draft bill and informing it, as well as others. The bill essentially now allows for or requires a second-tier vision screening that currently, and I'm going to summarize this as well as I can, not being a nurse or as well-versed in this bill, but the current vision screening that kids receive in school is for distance only, and it does not screen for other visual issues, including eye tracking, focusing, and convergence insufficiency based on systems questionnaires. So this bill would do 2 big things. Number one, it removes the oversight of the program from DWS over to the Department of Health. And then second, it adds this second-tier vision screening for certain students who, based on the first-tier screening and some additional questions, may be flagged as at risk and needing the second-tier screening. There are provisions in here that maintain a parent's right to opt their children out of either screening, and that starts on lines 435 of the bill. And that's kind of a high-level overview of the large changes to this bill. I don't know if you have any questions.
Are there any questions from board members? Board Member Earl? So let me understand. So at the beginning of the school year or whenever they do the screening, that parents would be notified and they can either consent or not consent? Is that how that works?
Yes, I'm just looking at the actual language to state. It starts on line 435. So the Department of Health would provide, for further information on exactly when and how that would take place, but it says if the parent, and this starts on line 438, if the parent of a qualifying child requests that the qualifying child not participate in a Tier 1 or Tier 2 vision screening, an LEA may not require the qualifying child to receive the Tier 1 or Tier 2 vision screening. But I believe the actual procedures of how they're notified of that, how that happens, will be developed in the rules that the Department of Health will be enacting related to this program.
Will that come to us once they develop that, or does that just go right? I'm just curious.
They're not required to come to the state board for consultation or before they enact their rules. They have their own independent rulemaking authority. But we could ask, I know that Betty Sue Hinkson, who's a part-time employee, like half-time USBE, half-time Department of Health, we could ask her to, when those rules are coming up, to come and give a report on that if you'd like, or we could also ask her to reach out to you specifically or other board members who are interested in those rules, and we could just send an email update through Deputy Superintendent Norman. I'm sure would be happy to update you all.
I'd just like to be familiar with the parent notification, what it looks like, and how that's handled. So I'm guessing that if they have a need beyond the first level, then there would be a re-notification. Is that right? It's just not one general notification. It would be a re-notification that this is the next process?
My guess that is the case. I don't know that the statute goes into that explicit of the procedures. Again, I think that they're relying on the Department of Health to pull that together and kind of flesh those out a little more. But my expectation is just because if I were writing that, and I imagine the Department of Health would feel the same, just because you opt into the Tier 1 doesn't mean you'd have to or also do the Tier 2. So if a family wanted to allow the Tier 1 screening but not the Tier 2, I don't see why this statute explicitly would prohibit an LEA from requiring the student to go through the Tier 2 screening.
Okay, and then there is a notification for the School of Deaf and Blind. What is that once again what does that look like? I'm just curious. Do you want me to give you a line? Sorry.
Well, yeah, did you see it in here?
I did.
Okay.
I did. I can look for a minute, and then if I can let you know what line it's on.
Can we come back?
Oh, it's the referral maybe and follow-up protocols. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, yeah.
So on lines 409 down at about 412, it talks about the Department of Health shall make rules. Again, this will be the Department of Health's rulemaking to describe standards and procedures for Tier 1 vision screening, including referral and follow-up protocols and reporting a student's significant vision impairment results to the Utah Schools for the Deaf and Blind. So that, again, could be something that, as those rules are being worked on, we could ask Betty Sue Hinkson to work with Deputy Superintendent Norman to send out an email and update you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, we have quite a few lights regarding this particular bill, and so if you have a very specific question regarding the bill and what's in here, remembering that this isn't a bill that impacts us as State Board of Education, but this is under the Department of Health. So next we have Board Member Gravitt.
Can you tell me? Raise your hand.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Who will be in charge of doing the Tier 2 screening, and how long does it take?
So there
I don't know if that's in the bill.
Well, there are volunteers. So they have volunteer, and I'm trying to remember where the language is, but certain people will receive training on how to do these screenings. They could be nurses, they could be other volunteers, a healthcare professional. So it would be, let me go back up
now. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So there are certain people who are qualified. They would receive a training. They have to submit a conflict of interest notice, so they can't be, coming in to volunteer and then build up a business. So, yeah.
Board Member Scott Hansen.
Just two quick questions. First, any idea about the scope of the problem that we're trying to solve? How many undiagnosed children there are in the population?
That is a good question. I attended one of these meetings, and I apologize, but I do remember we had parent advocates who had children who had not received the second tier screening and were very behind in their reading. It ends up impacting their academic progress because if it's not detected early, what they've found is students have been misdiagnosed as having a disability and maybe or some other problem, and then when they got the had the vision correction, astonishingly or not astonishingly, the students were able to catch up very quickly. But we had parents who talked about how it impacted their students' confidence and that they were behind academically because this vision screening didn't take place. But I apologize, I do not have the percentages, but we could get that to you.
That'd be helpful. I mean, one is too many, but it'd be helpful to know how many children we're talking about here. Next question is just the burden on the LEAs. I know this is run by DHS, but what exactly would the LEAs, they just turn over the gymnasium to the DHS for a period of time, or do they have activities that they need to perform?
So currently the Tier 1 vision screening is already required, so they are turning probably over the gym or the cafeteria, once a year or twice a year to do these screenings. This would flag just certain students, and I believe, again, I attended one meeting where they talked about the second screening actually happening potentially at the same time, but I don't believe we have anybody here to answer your explicit question. I don't know how much of an extra burden it will be, because the Tier 1 is going to be every student or every student that their family hasn't opted them out. The Tier 2 is a smaller percentage.
So is the LEA certifying these volunteers and things like that?
The LEA is not. I believe it's the Department of Health who certifies them.
Thank you.
Board Member Lisa Cummings.
Thank you. Recently, with the evidence-based policy at the federal level being formulated to streamline all data that is accumulated, so the Department of HHS would stream any data that they collect would streamline with education. Do you know how long the data will stay with HHS? Is it given to the parents? Or are they just a secondary source to say, here to the parents, you should probably have more, your son or daughter checked out more by a certified ophthalmologist? Or are we looking at more in-depth data gathering here than what they're asking? And will it stick with the child's education record?
I apologize. I do not have the answers to those questions. So I'm not familiar with the federal.
I love to stump you once in a while. That's good.
You did. I thank you. We could ask Betty Sue Hinkson and Jennifer Thronson would probably be the two best, or Larlie Gillespie in our office, and we could provide you that information.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Board Member Davis.
You had mentioned it went from DWS to Department of Health. What was the reasoning for moving to the Department of Health? And do they have more resources? I mean, I actually really support this, but it's hard enough to get the volunteers to do the Tier 1 screening. Now we're going to add on the Tier 2 screening, and I would like to get the information that was requested here about how many people typically are we talking about.
I do have some background on why I think it's changing.
Okay, thank you.
So USOR used to be under the State Board of Education, and a couple of years ago, USOR was moved to under DWS. So USOR used to oversee this program. And now that it's at DWS and doesn't have an affiliation with schools, I think that some people felt that the Department of Health was a better overseer because it's a health issue. I do know that there's been talk there. At times, people have wondered if USDB would be the appropriate overseer of this program also. But the group that worked on this came to the decision that they recommended it be the Department of Health, since USOR no longer has that school relationship. That's my overview of why one of the reasons. There might be many others.
Yeah, I mean, if you read in the bill, it puts more responsibilities on LEAs and school nurses to train people, and school nurses are spread between, 4,000 kids. I mean, it's a big, I support it totally, but it's going to be hard.
If there's no other lights on this one, if you want to move on to the next.
Sorry, Elisa was waiting.
You're right. I'm sorry, Elisa. Go ahead.
That's okay. I just wanted to get some clarity on the opt-in versus opt-out provision. The way that you've been reading it makes it sound like kids are automatically tested unless they opt out. I always thought this was an opt-in program, and I just wanted to be clear on that.
I am not, again, I could look at the current, I need to look at the current language and see if it's an opt-in only. I don't have to
I've been looking through it and I couldn't find it. So. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. If you want to move on to the next rule, if we can answer that question to board members offline.
Yeah. We're going to go to line 411. Just before we go on the next one, it just says, the Department of Health makes rules about the opt-out process, so they'll be working on that. So the next bill we would like to go to, if you don't mind, is SB 166, which is number 7 on your list. As a reminder, last week during our Thursday meeting, Jennifer Thronson provided an overview of this bill before it was numbered. Again, just as a summary, there's 2 portions of the bill. She reviewed in quite a bit of detail, and you'll remember we had the chart with the number of students that were impacted that participate in high-quality preschool programs. There's a number of them. Right now, certain portions of those high-quality preschool programs are administered and overseen by DWS and the School Readiness Board that resides at DWS, and then a portion of those programs are overseen by the State Board of Education. This bill would consolidate all of those high-quality school readiness programs under the School Readiness Board within DWS. And we would have a seat at the table on that board. That's the number one change. The second big change is there are provisions in the bill related to the Upstart program. Many of the changes in this bill are related to requests we made from audits that the State Board recently had. There were audits of the Upstart program. So many of the changes that are in SB 166 are again reflected on this sheet with staff requests. If you look at number 3, you can see that at one point we presented to you recommendations for changes to the Upstart program, and those changes are also in this SB 166. So multiple staff members have worked on this bill. The fiscal impact to this, as a reminder, currently some education fund money and some TANF money is used to support the LEA programs, and then general fund and TANF are used for the private providers. This bill would now have all of the money that supports those high-quality readiness programs be general fund money. And you last week prioritized that general fund money and supported that. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you'd like.
Board Member Davis?
Oh, all money except for the Upstart money, is that correct?
Correct. So the general fund money would be for the high-quality preschool programs that are administered by DWS. The Upstart program money that we oversee is education fund money.
Thank you.
Board Member Lisa Cummins?
I'm just going to speak against this. I am very concerned with the centralization that's going on with streamlining everything into one big, giant program. How do we know if we've had discussion in the past about which program is working, which one is not, and should we put all of our eggs in one basket with DWS? That really concerns me. Personally, I don't think they should have that information to begin with. I'm completely against that, but so has that been discussed? Yes. And are we just putting too much of a chunk of money for too many programs?
Well, one thing that may help you feel more at ease is that the evaluation of all of those programs would actually be done by USBE staff. So we would be receiving any information about the preschool programs within our office to then look at the longitudinal effectiveness of those programs and looking at student data as they enter into the public school. So DWS would not be collecting public school children information. Any information about our public ed students or our K-12 students would stay at USBE, and the evaluation of those programs, although they'll be administered by DWS, the evaluation and effectiveness of those programs and how the students perform, later on, will be done by the state board staff.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Earl?
So are there two assessments here or three assessments? One assessment sounds to me like it's coming from technology itself, right? The feedback from if someone's using technology in a home-based entity. Would that be accurate? Or are these children also having assessments prior to, or I don't know if you exit a technology program. Is that where that happens?
So Upstart, there's not a required assessment from the board. I do know there's the KEEP, it's a kindergarten entry assessment that if a student, for example, entered kindergarten and they had participated in Upstart, we would, from the kindergarten entry assessment, we would be able to see how prepared that student was. But Upstart may have their own assessments that are part of their program, but they're not necessarily administered by the board, if that makes sense. And any assessments that Upstart does,
it's built within their framework.
Now, however, please correct me if I'm wrong, Deputy Superintendent Patty Norman or anyone else in the audience, there is something called the PEEP, but I'm not sure, I don't know that much about the PEEP. I'm more familiar with the KEEP, which is the kindergarten entry and exit assessment. And again, the Upstart program is an electronic instructional program that our partner Waterford administers, and they may have internal to that program certain benchmarks and assessments they're tracking. But that would not be the same as, for example, with the high quality readiness schools or sites, the preschools, they're not necessarily, they likely aren't using Upstart. They're two separate programs.
Okay. And once again, I have concerns about going further and further into the homes and children's lives and the data that's collected here. That's why I'm a little concerned about assessments and how much assessing we're doing of young children. I realize those are probably formulated a little different than older students. At the same time, it's just, I understand there's accountability measures, but we are still anyways, I just have concerns over that. Yeah. So
the KEEP, I don't know if this answers your question. The KEEP is not an electronic assessment. Yeah. My understanding is the students aren't logging on to anything.
Right. The teacher's asking questions.
They're asking questions. Yeah. Colors.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We have 15 minutes left, so we'll move on to the action part of our meeting. So I have Board Member Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. I would make a motion that we show support for HB 236, SB 37, and SB 166, and the reason I'm clumping them together is because all of them have fiscal notes attached to them, and we have prioritized them on our list.
Just for clarification, you said 236, HB 236, SB 166, and what was the other one?
I'm correct. SB 37.
SB 37. SB 37.
227 also? What is 227?
So is there a second?
Amendment, Linda.
Is there a second to that motion? Okay, so the motion before us is to support HB 236, which is the teacher salary supplement amendments, SB 166, which is the school readiness amendments, and SB 37.
Number 15.
Thank you, which is the interventions for reading difficulties. Is there any discussion to that motion? Okay, seat for Board Member Davis, did you want to speak to this motion?
Amend a motion?
Yes, you may amend the motion.
I'd like to amend the motion to include a recommendation on HB 236 that the full supplement be given after 5 years rather than 10 years of teaching in the field.
The 236 is the teacher salary supplement, and you would like to request that staff look at speak to the legislature about changing the 10-year requirement to a 5-year requirement.
Correct.
Okay. Just as a clarification, that would change the fiscal note on his bill, which would change everything. So is that still your amendment?
It is.
Okay. So the amendment before us is to request that on HB 236, we speak to Representative Christopherson to change the 5-year requirement, or excuse me, the 10-year requirement to a 5-year requirement for funding that program. Is there a second to that amendment? It's been seconded. Is there a discussion to that amendment? Okay, I have a few lights, so go ahead and raise your hand if you want to speak to this amendment specifically. Okay, go ahead, Board Member Davis.
I think we're talking about a lot of folks here, a hefty percentage of people who are doing the same job. And, you know, in a bad economy, you can get a lot of teachers to fill these jobs. But in a hardy economy, you have to work with people who maybe aren't going through a traditional type of pathway to get to their teaching job. And we really need to keep these folks. I know at one point I was coordinating special education teachers for a whole entire district, and it was a hardy economy, and I was begging people to teach, and literally like the day before school started, if American Express and Novell hadn't have laid off, I wouldn't have had 5 people in special ed classrooms, even adults with a pulse. So I just feel like we need to try to do what we can to keep these folks. And if they've already taught for 5 years, that's a good commitment, and I think it'd be worth looking at that.
Board Member Newell, are you wanting to speak to this amendment? Okay, go ahead.
Is it okay? It's live now.
Yep.
I have to agree with Board Member Davis. As a father of an educator that has their master's degree, has taken all of the other coursework to have all of the qualifications that are required, but still not be eligible for any other incentives, I think it's very detrimental. And we do need more teachers in this field, and the incentivification a lot of times for people going into fields is financial, and I think this is really important for us to consider.
Okay, Board Member Hanson, Board Member Scott Hanson.
I too am certainly in support of rewarding our teachers who've helped us in this field, but I think in this case we need to defer to Representative Christopherson. He said he's taken this bill or a similar bill forward several times. He hasn't been able to get the traction he needs because of funding. And he's come up with an amount that he feels like he can push forward and get some support. So I would come out against the motion to amend his proposed legislation.
Thank you. Board Member Linda Hanson.
I would agree with our Member Hanson. I think that if we double the fiscal note, it may kill the bill.
Have the information.
Board Member Cannon.
I speak in favor of the amendment. I think we know that we've had difficulty getting teachers in these fields, and we've known it for years. And I think this is the purpose of this bill is to be some kind of a carrot to them who are those who are serving our kids in these high need areas that are so critical to their education. But in my mind, 10 years just puts that carrot so far out there that it's, you know, if I were being pulled away for another job and they said, oh, but look, in 10 years you get this reward, it's just too far to be much of a reward. I would think 5 years would be a much more lucrative incentive for teachers.
Board Member Davis?
I'd like to hear the information that Assistant Superintendent Stallings has. I think she's got some numbers for us. And I just want to reiterate that this amendment is not to make our support conditional on that happening, but just that, a request to look at that because 10 years is too long.
Madam Chair, if you mind, I can give the information. So, Assistant Superintendent Natalie Grange projects that the amendment to 5 years would change the eligible educators from 1,049 to 1,477. A little over 400 additional educators would qualify, which would have a fiscal impact of $7,973,748. So just under $8 million impact.
Board Member Cannon, did you want to speak to this again? No? Okay. Board Member Huntsman?
Yeah, I'm concerned about the amendment also because I think there's been a lot of work trying to get this moved forward by the senator, and he's finally starting to get a little bit of traction, and I'd hate to derail that. At the same time, I just want to bring to the board members' attention that the local LEAs, they have choices too in this if they want to go out in their negotiations and fund something to accommodate where this amendment's at. But I'm really worried about the loss of traction and how our ask may derail that a little bit.
Okay. So does anybody who has their light on want to speak to this amendment? Okay, Board Member Belknap.
Thank you. I actually really appreciate this idea, but I'm wondering if the amendment is clear, as Member Davis reiterated it. She said we were going to go talk to the sponsor, but to remain status quo. And so I'm wondering if there's really an amendment here or an ask to have our staff talk to the representative.
I think that was implied in the motion that staff would speak to Representative Christopherson about considering the change. So that was the amendment, if I understand that correctly, and it wasn't contingent upon our support. So it's in addition to, we support and. Is that correct? That was the motion. So that is the amendment before us. Okay, seeing no other lights that want to speak to this. Okay, so the amendment before us is to amend on top of our support for this particular bill is to speak to Representative Christopherson about considering changing the 10-year requirement to a 5-year requirement. So all in favor of that, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? So will the ayes please raise?
No.
Okay, so Board Member Gravitt, Board Member Lear, Board Member Davis, Board Member Newell, Board Member Belknap, Board Member Cannon, Board Member Earl, Board Member Linda Hansen, Board Member Mark Simpson. That motion passes.
Bolter is an aye.
Oh, Bolter was an aye. Board Member Ellis was a no. Okay, we're back to the original motion, which is to support HB 236, SB 166, and SB 37. Is there any further discussion to that motion? Board Member Earl.
Yes, I would like to divide these bills out, please.
Okay, so the motion is to divide.
Second.
That's been seconded. So is there any discussion to the motion to divide? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, will the ayes please raise their hand? So this is a motion to divide. Ayes, please raise your hand. Okay.
Alisa. And I did want to speak to the motion, but I couldn't hit unmute fast enough.
Sorry. Board Member.
If you would entertain that really quickly.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just, with these all lumped together, I'm going to have to vote no because I don't support all the bills, even if they were prioritized by the board. And it's a shame to vote no on something when I agree with some of the bills, but not all of them.
Okay, so all in favor, please raise your hand again, and we'll count those. So it's Board Member Lisa Cummins, Board Member Denny Earl, Board Member Mark Huntsman, Board Member Elisa Ellis, Board Member Bolter. Are you an aye or a nay?
I'm an aye.
Okay, so Board Member Bolter. Okay, that fails. Okay, so the motion before us is to give a measure of support for HB 236, SB 166, SB 37, and then the amendment would include speaking to Representative Christopherson in regard to HB 236, changing it from a 10-year to a 5-year requirement. Is there any discussion to that motion? Board Member Hanson.
I move an amendment, sorry. We did this at the very beginning, and I haven't had a chance to speak. So HB 227 is also one of those that we have prioritized the appropriation, and we have not voted on the bill. I thought we had, but I guess we haven't. So I would move that we add that also to the group of bills that we are discussing.
Okay, there's a motion or an amendment to add HB 227, which is the Utah Computer Science Grant Act.
To clarify, it'd be first substitute.
First substitute. Okay, so the amendment is to add HB 227 first substitute to our list of bills that we would like to support. Is there any discussion to that amendment? Seeing no lights, is there anyone online that would like to speak? Okay, so the motion before us is to amend to add HB 227 first substitute to our support, bills to support. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Is there any opposed?
No.
Oh, sorry, that was a no from Board Member Ellis or Bolter?
Bolter. Madam Chair, make one clarification, and I apologize, but the motion on HB 236 should actually be first substitute HB 36. He spoke to his first substitute today, although it has not been proposed yet. So if the board members will just want to make sure, I think that's the one with the 10-year requirement, and it is the first substitute.
Okay, so that motion passes. Okay, so we're back to our original motion, which is to support HB 236, first substitute with the amendment request with Representative Christopherson, SB 166, SB 37, and HB 277, first substitute. Is there any further discussion to that motion? Board Member Earl?
Yes, there's a number of these that I really strongly am excited about having passed, and then there's others I'm concerned about. And so I'm probably going to vote no on it. Well, I'm going to vote no on this, unfortunately, because we clumped them all together instead of allowing us to take those individual votes. So that's my...
Okay, I don't see any other lights for discussion. The motion before us is to support HB 236 with the amendment stated, first substitute with the amendment, speaking to Christopherson, SB 166, SB 37, HB 277, first substitute. All in favor? 227. Thank you. 2s and 7s look alike. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Is there any opposed?
No.
Okay, well, the ayes, please raise their hand. Okay, Board Member Gravitt, Board Member Lear, Board Member Scott Hansen, Board Member Davis, Board Member Newell, Board Member Belknap, Board Member Cannon, Board Member Linda Hansen, Board Member Mark Huntsman. I'm an aye. Okay, on the phone, were you both nays? Is that what I heard?
Yes, I was a nay.
No.
Thank you. Okay, that motion passes. Okay, we are out of time. Is there...
There was one bill, if you don't mind going over, that you may want to ask for an amendment on, or staff would recommend an amendment
the phone, if I may interrupt, the phone cuts off and we can't participate at 2 o'clock.
Well, I'll just quickly tell you that likely staff is going to ask for an amendment on HB 232, which requires any rule that you pass that has a fiscal impact of 2 million. It's 2 million or 10 million. I apologize. I have to get my notes. I wasn't ready. Let me get my notes. Here it is. Sorry. Okay. So it's over a 20-year period. The bill has an impact to a single person of $2 million or $50 million to a group of people, so LEAs. You would have to take that rule before we could enact it. It'd have to go before both the Public Ed Appropriations and Education Interim Committee before it could be enacted. We would like the clarification of either two options, either for the State Board of Education to be exempted from this, or number two, to have our rules that where we're providing money, because an impact can be a negative or a positive impact. We have quite a few rules that distribute millions of dollars to LEAs. One example would be the EARS formula. That's $40 million a year we distribute. So anytime we change that rule, we'd have to take that to an interim committee. If HB 120 were to pass, for example, we'd be doing a distribution formula for the $30 million, we'd have to take that to those committees. So we'd like to ask either for us to be exempted as an amendment, the State Board of Education, or number two, any rule that has a positive distribution impact to be exempted. So that if we're providing money, it's fine. It's only if we're actually causing a cost to those people that we'd have to bring that. So that's it.
So thank you for bringing that to our attention, and because I know there's a couple lights on, save your questions for our next meeting because we're losing some of our board members online. So thank you for your time.
Because I owe money.
Thank you. Okay, then the motion before us is to adjourn. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.
You are the only participant.